Good morning. Good morning, day tours. Give yourselves a round of applause. So I want to welcome you back to day 2 of our 2022 Roadmap to Educational Equity Conference that started on yesterday. Yesterday was on fire. Come on, if you were here yesterday, let's give a shout out. It was so exciting to really hear the mayor's charge, his call to action, to see everyone supporting, to go in every room and hearing people participating. The young people had a great experience in their youth summit, and it was really, really a great opportunity for us to start a very important conversation about education. And what I love about it, I'm pretty sure a lot of it we were preaching to the choir, right, because we have a lot of room for educators, but it was so many community partners and people willing to partner in the work, so it's not just the responsibilities of schools to educate our young people. And what really got me charged up is the fact that we even did a creed on some things that we are not going to tolerate anymore. So I'm going to jump right in it because we have a wonderful panel. I'm not going to belabor it more. I do want to just go over a couple of things that we said in maybe 2 minutes, going over what we said on yesterday, so you can just go to the next slide. And I'm just so happy that the mayor had the vision to do this. And today he was your mayor, and it's going to be exciting. Yesterday he was your mayor, but today we're going to make him put his principal's hat on, right, and go back to his years of education. So we thank you for being bivocational. Let's give it up for our mayor. You know that he's passionate about education. And I just wanted to remind you of what the outcomes. This is not just a 2-day event where we feel good. This is actually a charge, and we're listening and taking notes and recording everything so we can come up with recommendations, and we're really hearing people's lived experiences, and so we can remove those barriers, and so we can make sure that we don't claim our institutions, like we said yesterday, were student ready when they're not. Making the young people do all the resilient work, right? Overcoming this barrier, overcoming this inequity, right? So they can persist, but really transforming our schools into all student-ready institutions. And raise your hand and say, I want my school. Now, we can do better than that, educators. Come on, wake up. We got a good breakfast. I want my school to be an all student-ready institution. And that's what we're working on today, and we're going to fulfill these outcomes by making sure we document. The mayor's going to report out on all this important information that we're collecting, and we're going to continue with a series of webinars, of speakers events, where we actually can continue the work. Rome wasn't built in a day. What does that mean? You're not going to destroy equity overnight. Some things are very complex and long, age-old, but we can first, as we said in our framework, and you can go to the next one. You can go to the next one even. We said in our framework that we're building an equity conscious. Yesterday, we really focused on the data, letting the data speak, right? Looking at the data. Today, we're going to be dealing with what conditions do we need to make our schools more equity friendly? What do we need to do? What conditions are working? And we're going to start off our panel today really focusing on some wonderful, wonderful practice that was done right here in our own city of Newark, right? And so that's the great thing, that we don't get a chance. Sometimes we're so inundated in the work that we don't get a chance to document, right, and to really talk about what we've done well. And so we're going to build consciousness and really unpack the complexities of some of these issues. But we're going to go from a real user design approach where we focus on shifting the power dynamics and really not focusing on ourselves and what we created and all this great administrative stuff, but the students and the parents and how they're experiencing our schools. And we have 3 people that's here today that really did some serious work in our school systems, and we have 3 different school types represented today. And so that's wonderful because we're convening the entire city to make sure that we're getting this right. First, we have our Honorable Mayor Raz J. Baraka, who was the principal of Central High School in Hawthorne, and he was a teacher and an educator for 21 years. I hope I'm getting this right. So let's give it up for our mayor as an educator as well. And then we have Barudi Kafele, who was actually the former principal of Newark Tech, was part of the Essex County Schools of Technology. And he did some very transformative work also in that particular school type. And so it's wonderful for him to be able to share his practices. He also has an AP Institute where he still engages in professional development. And so in real time, people who are school leaders can get support, right? And so let's give it up for Barudi Kafele. And then we have Father Edwin Leahy, who's still in the work. He's still in that work. So exciting. He represents private institutions. And one of the things that we were looking for, where are spaces where our young people are feeling safe? And they can choose a school type, right, to find out where they're safe. And that's been an institution that has a long-standing history of what I didn't experience, obviously. I mean, now, if I was young now, I could have experienced it as a female, because now women are in this institution, but where male, young, and I want to say specifically, Black boy leadership was put on display. And I think we really need to hear those practices because I think that there's so much to learn about student voice, right, and student leadership and input. So let's give it up. Is it okay if I shorten it to Father Ed? I know that's everybody's favorite name. Father Ed and all the great work that he's done. So I'm just going to go to the next slide and set the frame so we can begin to hear those practices and strategies. I invite you. You have notes in this and you have your notepad. Let's get out and let's document these strategies, principles, because they transformed their school climates and they made their schools safe for Black and brown children. And we need to hear those strategies because we're in it real time. And so I'm excited to get started. So just a couple of things. There are 2 research that I'm going to refer to. I'm not going to spend the time because I want to hear those presentations they have ready for us. But one thing they talked about, there's research, and I gave 2 examples. This is one, Black Mothers Counter Narratives of Agency, a pulse on racism and parent involvement strategies, where students actually talk about how they feel in the schools. And I'm just gonna jump down. There's a lot of barriers like opportunity hoarding, but the thing that I think is important today is the fact that they feel invisible, unsafe, and not seen and not heard. And there's a lot of talk about how the curriculum is mishandled. And so, go to the next slide. This is also a work by Heldenberg, I want to make sure I say that correctly, who actually talks about in order to do that, we need to have a culturally congruent curriculum, and we need to be intentional about creating safe spaces. If you have Black and brown children in your building, you have to be intentional about creating a safe space where they're physically and psychologically safe. And so I'm going to use that to frame the conversation that we're actually going to have with these 3 greats that's on here, starting with how do we make young people feel psychologically and physically safe? So let's go to the experts. Let's give it up for this wonderful panel. Okay. Are you ready, guys? All right, testing. All right, bring some of that energy that you have in those schools, because we need some excitement. We want to experience it. Don't save it all for the young people. So let's start off with the first question. It says, school safety must be examined and recontextualized to promote a safe and secure, welcoming environment for Black and brown students. Describe your schools before your leadership and how you transform your schools into safe spaces for Black and brown children in Newark schools. Anyone wants to go first?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. You know, Dr. Brown, you referenced North Tech, but I want to go back to East Orange when I was principal at Sojourner Truth Middle School. And, you know, thinking about what it was before I got there and what it became, I want to say to you all the same thing I've been saying since the first day I walked into a school as a teacher in 1988. My message has not changed. My message is very simple, that when we talk about schools, in East Orange's case at that time, schools of black children, black and brown children, but East Orange being primarily black. Young people, first and foremost, have to feel welcome in that building, and they got to feel like they belong in that building. That's a whole conversation in and of itself. But in terms of what's happening in a classroom, youngster has to be able to see self within everything that is happening in that room. That room is a little microcosm of their world, but their world is through their lens. As I say, in my consulting capacity, as I say to principals every day or teachers, I say, you know, yes, I'm a human being. Yes, I'm a man. But first and foremost, I'm a black man. And most of my audiences are white because that's who's in education. And I point that out to them because my reality is black. So I don't want to have them paint a picture that young people are generic, and then they walk out into a world outside of the school walls, and it's very different from the reality in that classroom. So in terms of the question, I want to make sure that young people see themselves historically, culturally, socially, economically, politically, and personally. So I want the instruction to be able to breathe life into them, that they're able to embrace it, claim it as their own, and now I'm fully locked in. So when I had a superintendent back in East Orange, and that's why I reference East Orange, at that time, who I went to as a rookie principal, 1998, and said, Doc, allow me to create a school where these children here in East Orange see themselves in the learning. Not the generic approach that we've been doing probably for eons before I was even born, but something where they're going to see themselves on the pages in the lesson, on the walls, throughout the building, the culture, the climate, the atmosphere, the environment. And he said, go ahead, but I'm gonna hold you accountable. And we went on and got it done. And I'll end it this way. We used books that were way above them intellectually. We used Malefi Asante's Journey to Liberation, which is a college-written book. We used Tony Browder's Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which is a collegiate book. We used that. I had the right people in those classrooms to teach those particular electives. And those test scores that were low became not only the highest test scores at the middle school level in East Orange, but the highest test scores in the state of New Jersey of similar demographics. So the question became, how did y'all do that? And I said, it's very simple, actually. We made sure that the children saw themselves. Right now, with every individual in this room, you only hear me. And you'll only hear my two colleagues up here, well, three actually, the moderator. You only hear me if I'm speaking to your world. And if I'm not speaking to your world, you saying, I wish this guy would hurry up and pass that microphone, because I don't want to hear him. It doesn't relate to me. It's not relevant to me. But if it's relevant, you hear me. Well, the same thing happens in the classroom. If it's not relevant to the youngster, he and she don't hear you. So it's got to be relevant. I'm going to stop there.
I'll jump in. 1, 2. So I want to first agree with everything Baruti Kafele said. First of all, that's right on the money. I think some of those practices happen, obviously, at Central, but my entire career in administration in Newark was always difficult. So I just want to start there. I went to Burnett Street School first, And principal, my first year there, the principal had a nervous breakdown and didn't come back. So they left me there. Then I went to Weekway with no principal, and myself and Mr. Stone and Mr. Benjamini, we were 3 vice principals with no principal for a year. Then I went to Hawthorne Avenue in December. After my stay at Weekway, I went to Hawthorne in December because the principal, I guess, left, retired, whatever. I was the principal from that year all the way to maybe a year or so after that. And the superintendent came to me and said, I need you to go to Central High School. I was kind of devastated by that because I was having a great time at Hawthorne. I mean, it was easy. My barber was across the street. Parents would bring me pie and food, and it was a different experience, And so she told me that you worried about 300 kids, I'm worried about 40,000. And so I had to go to Central. And I have to put this stuff in context. The year before I got there, a kid was murdered at a basketball game right outside the school on Martin Luther King. A kid was shot right there, right after the basketball game. Some kids ran onto the court, and it spilled out into the street, and somebody was shot right out there. And I was like, you sending me here? I was like, wait a minute. What did I do wrong? I thought I was all right. But when I went there, you can see why these things were happening. And I just want to show what the trend, because people don't understand what we get ourselves into. They think that, these schools, you just snap your fingers and everything is right, or that you could just pick kids who you want and the teachers are just bad, or you just got wrong policy. It's far from that. The school was completely segregated. When I say that, you had the Haitian kids were on one side, and they all took classes together under the auspices of bilingual education. They had Haitian classes with Haitian teachers who spoke French and Creole, and they stayed in those classes all day for 4 years. Math, English, science, just in there. And none of those kids were passing the test, and it's a wonder, it wasn't a mystery to me. You go to the cafeteria, and everybody was divided in the cafeteria. You had the Spanish-speaking kids here, the Haitian kids here, African kids here, the Crips over here, the Bloods over here. I mean, it was completely divided. In fact, there was a staircase that the kids from Haiti went up only. A back staircase that they went up only. This is what the school was when I came there. So to be able to change and transform that took a lot of heavy lifting. And it was very tiring, by the way, and painstaking. You just to do that. Never mind the state test and all this other stuff that people try to get you to get kids ready for. But how do you get somebody ready for that in an environment like this, right? In fact, there were teachers who were doing great jobs. We had great teachers in there. Robin Scipio was one of them. You go, the school would be chaotic. You go past her class, and it was just like a whole nother thing going on. It was like it was another building. Her class was serious. The kids that were probably in another class doing all kind of craziness was in her class like, and I was like, she must be beating these kids. But clearly it was the fact that she loved them, and they loved her back, and she cared about them and gave them the education. And what Dr. Kafele said was she put the kids in the education itself, right? And I was trying to figure out a way to get her out of the classroom to be in charge of the English department, and finally that did happen. But we had to break that whole thing up, and we did. We had to struggle with teachers and students and parents, well, mostly teachers and parents, not students, first to break up this idea that kids came here, to learn English. They didn't come here to learn English. They came here to learn math and science and history like everybody else. They're using English as an opportunity to do that. It's just a vehicle, right? We had to break that up. So you tell kids, you gotta come out of this class. You gotta go to the math class. You have to be in math classes with everybody else. You have to break that up. And so we began breaking those classes up. We began having cultural events in the school representing Haitian culture, African culture, Dominican culture, African American culture. We began having events, cross-cultural events, all of these things to force kids in a way to recognize and see each other and be a part of what was going on. This whole cafeteria thing had to be destroyed. It had to be destroyed. We worked hard to destroy that. In fact, I probably spent more time in the cafeteria than I did. I had to do my work for the district after school or on Saturday because most of my days was in the cafeteria, in the old school and the new building, just to break up that culture in the cafeteria. We brought chess boards in the cafeteria. We played chess in the cafeteria. We stayed there. We talked to the kids in that cafeteria. I sat at the tables where the kids were isolating themselves. I sat at the table myself at those tables, had lunch with those kids, talked to them, brought other kids with me, disrupted that whole situation, right? We began creating small organizations in the school, and I don't want to go on, but we created small organizations with teachers and kids got together and they supervised them, throughout the day and began making them interested in other kind of things and activities. We created a convocation that I think all of us up here did. We created a convocation. I think after that, many people began doing that. Every day we said our Pledge of Allegiance. I talked to the kids. I sung songs. We let them speak. And on Tuesday, we took a whole hour in the morning and called it Big Tuesday. And Big Tuesday was the day our attendance was the highest. And on Big Tuesday, I used to run it, then I stopped, and then Dr. Brown used to run it because she was my vice principal then. And the kids basically performed and acted and did all kinds of things during Big Tuesday. Then I took all of the teachers away. And so the auditorium was just students and Dr. Brown. Could you imagine the auditorium with the whole school and one adult? She was in there. And I went away and went into the cafeteria with all of the teachers, and we did staff development every Tuesday. Every Tuesday in the morning to talk about in a different way what the kids were talking about in their cafeteria. To talk about, how do we relate to these children? How do you educate the children? What are the issues that you have in the classroom? We did that. We read books. We did book studies on Tuesdays in the cafeteria talking about the very issues, our children, who they are, their culture, how to teach them, all of these things while they were in the cafeteria. Now, of course, in the beginning, everybody was like, oh, you're wasting time with the kids. They're playing. They're not playing. They're having fun, yeah, but they're also learning how to be young people in a school that belongs to them. That belongs to them. That's what we. That was incredibly. There was a whole bunch of other stuff, but I'm going to stop there. We also created a uniform. We were probably the first high school, if not school, in the city outside of Catholic schools that had a uniform first. I created an emblem of the school patch that represented the culture of the kids in the school. It was a Dinkra symbols, which is a con. We created that, which meant imperishability, all these kind of things we put on there, and we taught the kids what it meant. We explained it to them. We sung the school song. Every morning we sung the school song. Every morning we sung the school song. Every morning we sung the school song. In the convocation, we sung the song. And the kids and the teachers and adults who didn't know the song, who've been there 30 years, the kids knew the school song. They sung that song. It created pride in the school, pride in the building, pride in themselves. And I think more than all the academic stuff, and hopefully we get a chance to talk about that, helped transform that school more than anything else.
Thank you for that, Father Ed.
How I got to follow the mayor. The mayor reminded me of the class. It was an English class where the teacher loved the kids. Overwhelming sadness overwhelming anger is only conquered by overwhelming love. So if you don't have teachers that have overwhelming love, then you won't solve any problem. Most of what we see as academic underachievement has zero to do with cognition. It has to do with unbelievable emotional noise that goes on in our young people, especially our young men, with good reason. But unless that's mitigated, you're wasting your time trying to get them to do English, algebra, history, chemistry, physics, or anything else. So one of the things that we've tried to do is how to create a safe environment. Number one, it's obvious to everybody, I suppose, that I don't look the same as anybody else on the panel. So I try to stay out of the way of a lot of kids and keep them from making decisions that are life-threatening. Short of that, the school is run by the kids. No one is hired at our place without being interviewed by a student committee. Adults have interviewed people and said, this is the person we want. The student committee will say, you're making a bad mistake if you do that, because we'll run right over the top of that person. So everybody is interviewed who applies with us in any capacity by the students. But what we do in this order, first, create community. What's been destroyed in our country, not in our city, everybody wants to blame it on our cities. In our country, in Washington, D.C., is any kind of sense of community. And a community is made up of people willing to accept the other the way the other is.
Come on.
We always want to accept the other as long as we can fix them or change them, you say. But community, that community needs to be visible. So as just like Central, we meet every single day. The most important thing we do is our morning meeting, our convocation. We also have Big Tuesday, except we have it on Friday. And the students run it. We sing, dance. Lots of times we have guests that come and want to know, because in order to do what we do, we have to raise a lot of money. And sometimes people who look like me come into the convocation, especially on Fridays, and they all start backing up to the door because they're not sure what's going to happen, because the room is just about to explode with people, who's dancing, who's singing. And if one guy dances here, somebody over there has got to answer him dancing, and it starts to go all over the room, and people start to look. If you don't know it, and I live in Newark.
It's amazing.
If you don't live in the culture, you don't know what's going on next. But it's exciting as heck. Number two thing that we do is tend to the heart. We have a very, very busy counseling center, not a guidance office. We have a guidance office as well for college placement. We have a counseling center. We do face-to-face talk therapy, and we do groups. So there are 7, and where we live, we're in one. Where we live, we have a great advantage, because everyone studying psychology eventually has to do internships. So PhD candidates and master's candidates have to do internships. So we have several interns from Rutgers, from Fairleigh Dickinson, from Seton Hall, who come in and can help with intake and histories with kids. And then we have 7 psychologists. One embedded in our elementary division, one in our girls division, one in the middle division, and then 3 for the guys, since there's more guys than there are girls. The girls are in school. Rudy said he didn't know the girls were there. The girls broke in. There was no plan to have girls. They broke in. The entire girls division was created by 8 17 and 18-year-old girls. That created such momentum, all girls of color, by the way, that created such momentum that it was impossible to say no. We didn't have any space or money, but we've got 170 girls now. It'll jump to about 210 next year. So the big privilege that we have, that we never had before, all of our talking with guys about women was all theoretical. But now we get to deal with it in real time. So they learn real fast that you tell a girl to calm down, watch out. relax, watch out. But it's been a great blessing for us. We have about 1,000 kids. The third thing we do is create leaders. This help, especially, I don't know why black men don't feel like they have a voice in this country. I don't know why they do that, but it's ridiculous. But the people's voice needs to be discovered and amplified.
That's right.
So and I believe in education, we've got the thing backwards, because we evaluate principals on the basis of what goes on in schools. Well, if you give leadership and power to kids, you're giving leadership and power to mentally impaired people, because their brains aren't fully developed yet. So they're gonna make dumb decisions. That's what we're looking for, dumb decisions at our place. So you can debrief the kids and say, what could you have done better? What didn't you consider that you should have considered? But if the principal's being judged on the mistakes that are being made in the school, the principal is at risk. The system's got to be inverted. With the more discussion, the more upheaval, the more disturbances in school, the happier I am, because I get to get in arguments with kids about things. I'll give you one quick example.
Every day.
A week or two ago, yeah, any day, right? A year or so ago, the leaders decided that they were going to give everybody off at 12:30. Going to end school at 12:30. Of course, the kids go crazy over that. I say, yeah, but that's a bad idea, because we've got in the building 7th graders all the way through 12th graders, and we don't have parents that can walk away from their desk at 12 o'clock to go pick somebody up. A lot of parents in the suburbs can do that, but we don't. So it's a really, really bad idea to do that. And I thought I had the leadership convinced. Mark Comisano is going to be laughing at me. And I went about my day. This was at 8 o'clock in the morning. We had the morning meeting, went on. At 11:30, I see an email that says, school will end at 12:15. So, what the? I thought I had the thing solved. I get all the leaders together. I said, well, I thought we did. Yeah, but we rethought it, we're going to do it. Right now I got to get in another argument with them, right? Now, imagine if this kind of discussion, some teacher who doesn't like the principal calls the central office, and now somebody's making a judgment on the principal, you say?
That's right.
So I'm in this argument, and I'm watching the clock, because 12:15 comes, all the teachers think school's over. Well, luckily, I prevailed, but I didn't prevail until about 11:55, which now means they're up against the time challenge to get the word out to everybody that we're going to stay in school and save face, so they don't look bad in front of everybody else, right? That they got rolled over by the head of the school. So they figured it all out, got the word out. But the question I ask all the time to myself is, what would I have done if I couldn't convince them? Luckily, I convinced them. But if I couldn't convince them, I'm not sure what I would have done, because they're the ones in charge. I work for them. And most people can't wrap their head around that. So I tell people all the time, St. Benedict's Prep is a high-risk operation. And most people in the suburbs think, what are people getting hurt, people getting stabbed? No, but when you put this kind of power in the hands of kids whose brains aren't fully developed, it's risky. So the adult's job is to keep them in a corral, so to speak, that they don't do damage, permanent damage to themselves or others. Outside of that, any mistake is acceptable. And the fourth thing we do is academics. But that's in that order. In that order. Community, heart, leadership, academics.
That's right.
Powerful, that's powerful.
Yes, yes.
That's how it goes.
Love everything you just said. I wanted to say this. You said something, Father Ed, that triggered something in me when you said, why do black men feel they don't have a voice? I want to respond to that. No, we good. This is an equity conference.
That's right.
And one of the things about equity, there's a lot of things actually, but when we talk about moving forward, under the umbrella of equity, there's a question that we've got to ask ourselves. And that question is, how are we defining equity? Because see, we're in a school and you got classroom 101 here, and the teacher's perspective of equity is whatever, but down in 103 is something different, and up in 206 is something different. Then you got chaos in the building as it relates to equity, and now you really don't have equity happening. So I noticed that in the work I do, because I spend a lot of my life talking about equity. And I found that there's no universal definition of what equity is. There's a whole lot of perspectives, but in terms of a universal definition, it doesn't exist. Those of you in this room that know my work, you know that if I can't find it, I'm going to create it. So I went on and created the definition that I wanted to use and then wrote a book around it. And the definition I use is meeting young people where they are as they are. So however you're coming in there, that's where I got to meet you. But with that, as it relates to what Father Ed said, I said, for me, I have 3 equity non-negotiables. And those of you taking notes, I want you to write this down, right? 3 equity non-negotiables. I don't care who I'm listening to as it relates to equity. I don't care what your credentials are. If I don't hear these 3, then in my mind, there's a gaping hole in your equity analysis. So, number 1, student individuality. Don't lump me with him, with her, with her. I'm me, and that has to be considered. Number 2, student cultural, racial identity. Don't be in the classroom and say, I don't see race, I don't see culture, I don't see ethnicity, I don't see... No. That's a black young man. That's a Latino young lady. That's a Native American young man, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's got to be considered, but it's got to be seen who I am, because it comprises a large part of my identity. But here's the one, student voice, number 3. And that is critical with that whole notion of why do so many black men not feel they have a voice. My question with that, with student voice, therefore, would be, for those of you in education, in classrooms, in leadership, counseling, whatever it is in this room, or who will see the video later, what structures, what mechanisms are in place in that classroom, in that school, that allows youngster to develop voice, right? To find voice. Right. I'm so proud sitting in this room. I turned 62 last Saturday. And good, brother. I look good, right? Look good. Shade is gray, and you'll swear I'm 30, yes, right? Yes, so, but here's the thing. Here's why I bring this up. I got Reginald Bledsoe in this room. I got Kylisha Hill in this room, Wingfield Hill, in this room, who are 2 students of mine back at North Tech, who obviously, you notice, found their voice. Everybody knows the 2 of them. They particularly know Reggie nationally because I talk about him everywhere I go, right? But the point I'm making is this. When a youngster is in a classroom where there's an intentionality with helping youngster to find their voice, but also appreciating, respecting, acknowledging their voice. So maybe their voice is not my voice. That's okay. Maybe their voice is the antithesis of my voice. That's okay. Because if my voice is not respected, if my voice is not appreciated, if my voice is not acknowledged, that means I'm not respected. I'm not appreciated. I'm not acknowledged, because my voice is the verbal extension of who I am. So I'm saying here, as it relates to what you said, we've got to make sure that those structures, those mechanisms are in place in every classroom that gives that youngster opportunity to find voice. Using the word voice in this regard synonymous with purpose. We talk about finding one's purpose, well, finding one's voice. Yeah. And holding that mirror up to the young person and asking the youngster, who is that?
in the reflection. And I promise you, there's a whole lot of young people in classes who are represented by folks in this room. When you ask them that question, they do not have an answer beyond the name on the birth certificate. Who are you? Because they haven't found their voice. Once a person finds their voice, you can't stop that person. That person is unleashed to be able to accomplish anything that one conceptualizes that they can accomplish. Voice matters.
I just want to, I want to talk about why that's difficult. And I first of all, I agree 100,000%. It's difficult for a lot of teachers and administrators because it's a struggle for power and control. And many people believe that they lose control or lose power when you give kids too much. The real issue is you don't have control anyway. Like you don't, it's really an illusion because there's no way you can control 1,000 children. If they decide tomorrow to tear the place down, you're just in trouble, right? So you don't really have control, right? And so this idea of they're saying too much, you're doing, because adults do that to each other, right? And what we don't realize is the more we let power go, the more we actually have it, right? Because people are allowing you to be in control. They're allowing you to, so it's a difference when, like, so I used to come into the auditorium, it could be crazy. I get on the stage and it get quiet. I didn't beat nobody. The kids allowed me
Yes, sir.
the opportunity to speak.
Yes, sir.
And why are they allowing me to speak and not allowing you to speak?
Because you earned it.
There's a difference, right, of what we've given. And I used to say, I put money in the bank. People say, well, I put money in the bank, meaning I've given so much, I could take a lot and still have some left over because I got a lot of money in the bank. I've been to basketball games, I've been to football games, I've been to kids' houses when they get in trouble. I'm there for them. I done gave them $1 here, $2 there, $5 there. Your shirt is messed up. Go home, come back at 12, come in the office. I got you, don't worry about it. I'll talk to the teacher for you. Got a lot of money in the bank. Mr. Baraka had a rough night at home, don't worry about it. Come sit in the office for 2 hours. I got you, you're not late. You know what I mean? That I got money in the bank. Oh, you letting them get over? No, I'm putting money in the bank.
That's right.
Because when it's time for me to tell them to sit down and be quiet, they're gonna do it. Oh, I got you, B-Rock. I got you. You know, because I got a lot of money in the bank. And we have to, I used to meet with like the gang kids in the school, kids that were involved with gangs. And I started that at Weekway because one time I went outside and it was just chaos. And I was like, I gotta know what's going on before I got out this building. So I don't need to run into craziness. So I started meeting with these guys and I carried that practice to Central. So one of the students, speaking of student voice, one of the students named Oye Tunde, who works for the city now, Oye, used to follow me to these meetings. And the kids was like, he ain't in there, he used to sit in the back. And I'd be like, yo, you're not in no game. He said, I just wanna know what you're doing in here, right? And then after the maybe third or fourth meeting, he would say, these are good, but the problem is there are a whole bunch of children in the school who wanna talk to you, but you only give them an audience. These guys get an audience. So what you're saying in essence is that in order for me to get a personal kind of one-on-one with the principal, I got to tear something up, right? So we made a little back and forth that he would go into our convocation and sing Lift Every Voice and Sing, right? He said, I'm going to make everybody sing Lift Every Voice and Sing. I said, you can't do it. It's impossible. While in the middle of me speaking, whether they was being defiant or whatever it is, in the middle of me speaking in the congregation, he jumped up, lift every voice and sing. In the middle of that, kids looked at him like, till earth. But it was like, yeah, we get ready to do this, right? And before you know it, there was a bunch of kids singing it. And he proved his point that we needed to have another opportunity for young people to create leadership, right? And so we created these little organizations in the school that did almost all the other things everybody else did, but they had their colors, they had their dances, they had their handshakes, they had all the other kind of things, but they were positive cultural organizations that were run by students but facilitated by the adults. I had a group, Dr. Brown had a group, most of the administration had a little group that was running around the school, but those kids in that group eventually became the leaders of the school. Eventually became the leaders of the school.
That's good stuff right there. You want to jump in?
One story. I was told by Dr. Price, Clement Price, from Rutgers, that I had to tell this story every time I was in front of a group of people. Speaking of voice. When St. Benedict's Prep closed in 1972, one of the questions that somebody was going to ask is, what was the school like before I took over? There wasn't one, because in 1972, the school closed. And the reason why it closed, that was sold to people, was it closed because of diminishing numbers and finances, which was absolutely not true. It closed because of racism. That's why it closed. That's the fundamental reason why the school closed. When we opened the school, there was never any intention of reopening St. Benedict's Prep. Everyone in the monastery that I lived in, we lost 14 people from our monastery that left and went to Delbarton. So we're sitting in Newark feeling proud of ourselves, right? This is why it's so important for people who look like me to realize this all the time, that race, if you are white and born in the United States, you're a racist. Now you can recover from it, but if you were born here, you got it. I'll give you a perfect example. So we're sitting in Newark, 14 of us, 15 of us in the monastery, all white, and we were committed to Newark and committed to education, but we didn't want to call it St. Benedict's Prep. Why? Why? Maybe did we think, yeah, but they can't do what St. Benedict's was like, right? All of that stuff that runs in us. One night at a parents' meeting, Carl Lamb Sr., his son was the member of the class in 1978, Carl Jr. He said to me, hey, Father Ed, I want to ask you a question. How come when it was all of you, it could be St. Benedict's Prep, and now that it's all of us, it can't be St. Benedict's Prep anymore? And I said, I think, Mr. Lamb, I think you just reopened St. Benedict's Prep. Carl Lamb was an African-American father who reopened St. Benedict's Prep in this city. Not the monks of Newark Abbey, not Father Ed. Everybody introduces me all the time as, oh, Father Ed reopened St. Benedict's Prep. That is absolutely not true. Carl Lamb Sr. reopened St. Benedict's Prep with that question on a Tuesday night in our cafeteria in about 1976. That's how, so voice is absolutely critical. In our morning meeting, the last thing that the senior group leader, the student who runs the school, will say, Father Ed, do you have anything you want to say? That's an invitation. Who's in control of the invitation? The person sending the invitation, correct? Not the recipient. I'm the recipient of the invitation. The invitation is issued by a 17 or 18-year-old student. I believe that stuff is really important. Subtle little things that send messages of who's in charge. When after 9/11, we had to change our whole security thing and everything else. And at the front door, you had to sign in. Our alumni went out of their mind. Sign in. Why do I have to sign into my own place? Then we had a badge that you got, so if you were walking around the building, you knew you were signed in. Right? They wouldn't wear them. We actually had to create another shape of a badge as a compromise that they accepted. So you talk about a safe place. You could go through our gym at 9:30 on a Thursday night maybe and find 25, 30-year-old men, lawyers, bankers, other folks that didn't play in basketball. They didn't ask anybody. They didn't call for permission. They're all our alums, right? They feel like it's theirs. They own it. They don't have to ask. Happens all the time. Now, it's easier for us because a bunch of us live there. It's much more difficult for you in schools that everybody goes home at the end of the day. It locks at a certain time. But when the girls broke in, I had at that time about 38 senior group leaders that stretched all the way back to 1978. The first thing I did was I put out an email, I said, I need a meeting with all the leaders. And I talked to every one of them, stretching back to 78, 79, about what they thought about the idea. before I was going to go down the road and change what they had created. They created it, I didn't. I was just riding along with them. Before I was going to change that, I wanted their permission. So that series of leaders that stretched from up to 2019 all the way back to 1978 were the ones that gave the imprimatur to say, yeah, go ahead and do it. All ways of creating ownership and community.
Definitely. It's back on. Thank you. You guys really kind of did the second question. We talked a lot about strategies, and we talked about how you transformed, and you talked about, I know Father Ed talked about community, leadership, and academics. I'm missing one in number 2. Heart, all right, community, heart, leadership, and academics. And I know, Confela, you talked about your equity model, student individuality, student racial and cultural identity being at the center, and developing student voice. And I know a lot of those things were already embedded in you, Mayor Baraka, in your talk, but you also talked about risk-taking, and I think that vulnerability of transforming power and being willing to fail and giving that power to young people, not to disrupt, but to empower them, because eventually that's what you want people to do, is make decisions on their own, right? And hopefully good. And buy-in. You talked a lot about buy-in, because once you empower the young people and they feel that this is their safe space, they are going to buy in. So you talk a lot about it, and I know you put a lot of things in front of academics, but the truth is all 3 of you saw some academic growth. And I don't want to just focus on school climate, because school climate is really the foundation to academic growth. So I just want to really talk to you greats, and I'm going to keep using that, because we got to celebrate our own greats in our own city. Yes, I want an applause right now. Let's celebrate our own greats in our own city, because we pay a lot on consultants, right, to come in here from places that don't look like us, and we believe in them before we believe in the people that did it in your own backyard with your own kids that you know, they're brothers and sisters, and you know they're tough. Right? And so we have to make sure that, I believe it, if you're successful as an educator in Newark, I really believe in my spirit that you can go anywhere and make things happen. Come on, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And so I really want to stress that you're here to get your flowers, to celebrate, and we're here to steal these strategies, because we're going to make all of our schools student ready. And we can't be here and as you said, Kafeli, and say it's not relevant, it's not applying to me. If you're a leader over a building with black and brown children, it's relevant. Because again, as Mayor Baraka, you're going to lose that power if you don't put some of these strategies in place. So please talk to me about academics. We need to celebrate your academic growth, because it wasn't just transforming school climate. How did you do it? Once you lay that bed, a foundation, let's say they take all these strategies and put it to work. How do you now go to the next step? Because that's what we're really getting judged on, right? Academic growth. So talk to us about how you did that.
Let me go first. This is just the teacher in me, y'all. It's not arrogance. Those of you taking notes, get this down. I'm gonna say this slowly. I'm mindful of the fact that equity is the theme of the conference, even though we're talking school climate and culture on the panel. In order for equity to roll out effectively in a school, in a district, that teacher in that classroom has to have what I call an equity mindset. You can't just talk equity, but that teacher doesn't have an equity mindset. So typically, I'll distinguish doing equity from being equity. See, the doing equity is the training that one receives, and then the professional implementation. But that being equity is personal. Right, it's intrinsic. It's an embodiment. You're going into that classroom and you want for each individual that's represented in that room. So therefore, when I ask that you take notes, I mean, it might be hard, but I want to give this to you, and then I'll give you a quick example. An equity mindset teacher, what does that mean?
An equity mindset teacher is a teacher who utilizes a variety of developmentally appropriate instructional strategies that consider the differing academic, social, and emotional needs of each of the learners in a student-centered, culturally responsive, culturally relevant, barrier-free, bias-free, equity mindset classroom. Finally, where student individuality, student cultural identity, and student voice matter exponentially, period. That's a long definition. I'll tell you how you can get it later on, right? But here's what I'm saying. Learning cannot occur optimally, I don't think, if learning is not culturally relevant, culturally responsive in terms of relations, and culturally relevant in terms of what we see, what we're exposed to in that classroom. I don't think that it can occur optimally linked to what I said previously about that particular classroom model. So therefore, without monopolizing the time, I'm thinking about, because I want to go back to my teaching days. And in my teaching days, there was no word for equity then. It's this great teaching. Somewhere around 2012, 13, here comes this word equity. And it came on as if it was some kind of a trend or a fad that will die out at some point. But those of us who understand, equity's always been here. That teacher that understands that I can't use a whole group instructional approach and expect to connect with 25 learners in a classroom. It's just not going to happen. Even our audience here this morning, depending on your own backgrounds, you're hearing the three of us very differently because you just don't have the same background. Doesn't mean that someone's smarter than another, it just means we come from different experiential backgrounds, so we're going to receive information differently. So as teacher, I had to understand that with the 25 who were sitting in my classroom, that they're not the same, but I don't have this word equity. All I got now is common sense. That you, and you are going to learn differently, are going to perceive differently, are going to aspire differently, right? So therefore, as teacher, I've got to consider that. It means it's a heck of a lot more work because it's very easy to stand up and do what we're doing. Just figuratively speaking, take a mic and just talk all day. That's easy. Doesn't take a lot of brilliance to do that. But to be able to take young people and now say, wow, you're visual, but you're auditory, but you're kinesthetic, right? And we go on, and to be able to navigate that and to be able to maneuver within that is doable, but it requires a different kind of training. So watch this and then I'm gonna shut up. Staff meetings. I haven't met too many teachers that look forward to a staff meeting. I really haven't. Like, I always remember, like, I led 4 different schools over my 14 years. And I always had an amen corner, right? So when those days when I felt like preaching, they in the room and they're very vocal. But, so they look forward to just hearing kafele. But then the rest of us on that staff, everybody may not be excited about a staff meeting, but I decided, contractually, I got 90 minutes, and my rep became, Kafele uses all 90 minutes, right? We ain't leaving in 30 minutes, because I'm not, see, thank God for the invention of email. So now, the administrative things I could talk about in a staff meeting, I'll write that up on Sunday morning at 8 o'clock and hit send at 10. As a ritual every Sunday, and then at the staff meeting, as the mayor just said about Big Tuesday, staff meeting, we talking about teaching and learning. We talking about Reginald and Kylisha, right? How do we connect with the two of them? That's what we're talking about. We ain't talking about the copier ran out of paper, right? Or the copier is not working, or any other thing we could talk about, gripe session. We talking about how do we connect with the children that attend this school, who live in this particular zip code. Because I've got staff members that don't know this world. I got staff members who grew up in a very different bubble. And from birth to the first day that they began teaching, their bubble was very different. And now they come into this urban environment because this is where they were hiring. And now I got this job in a new bubble. So now the bubble of the youngster that he or she grew up in, and the bubble of the staff member that grew up 280, intersect. And that teacher, in so many cases, is not ready. I can't teach what I don't know. But I can't teach whom I don't know either. And now these bubbles just intersected, and I'm in a world I don't know. The children know you because that's who's in the classroom. 84% of teachers are white. So the children know white teachers, but the white teacher may not know black children, may not know black people. So as principal, I gotta help teachers navigate through that. And one of the first books I'm going to expose them to, and I promise I'm putting this mic down, one of the first books of every school I led that I'm going to expose my staff to is The Miseducation of the Negro, written by Dr. Carter G. Woodson in 1933. As I tell every teacher in America that I have access to, I don't care what you know. If you have at least one black child that you teach, and you do not have that book in your library, amongst many others, but I start with that one. If you don't have that book in your professional learning library, then your library has a huge gaping hole, and your children are going to suffer as a result.
Thank you for that. Let's give it up for that, because that is the strategy for academic staff development, teaching them to your staff to be culturally relevant and ready. I just want to before the next two responses, the think tank for learning acceleration that the mayor started, that's one of the things that everybody in the room developed on what causes learning loss. Not just time out of school, but lack of teacher readiness to engage during the time that they have them. So I want us to put that on our purview, that our children are not learning because some of our teachers are not ready to engage. And so I just wanted to, that was a good point that I wanted to emphasize. Please talk to me again about academics. How did you transform your academics?
I think you have to kind of sew together all the things that we're saying. So I'm not going to go over again what has already been said, but what our experience has been helpful is this counseling center. I've seen grades go up like a thermometer in the summer. Once you begin to mitigate the tremendous emotional distress of incarcerated dad, absent dad, present dad, but emotionally unavailable. One of the things I had zero clue about in any dimension until the girls broke in is the number of young women and girls that have been abused in this country. It's staggering, staggering. That all affects how you go about doing English, history, how you see the world. So the counseling center for us has been an enormous tool to help academic performance, an enormous tool. And the problem is lots of young people in the city don't have access to it in any, it gets overwhelmed. Whatever availabilities there are get overwhelmed really, really fast. What has helped us also is, in addition to one-on-one talk therapy, but kids being able to minister to each other. So you only need one adult then. You have one adult and sit down 30 kids and around issues. So we have one group of guys that call themselves unknown sons. Guys who don't know who their father is or have a fractured relationship with their father. They meet every single week. There's another group that's called, it's an anger management group. So they meet, you only need one adult. Any burning issues, and somebody starts talking, and before you know it, they can help each other. And what the help is interesting, the help is sometimes just walking into a room and realizing that someone else has the same suffering that you have. There's a consolation that comes along with that. So he may not even have to say anything, and some kids will go and not say anything for weeks until they get more and more and more comfortable and listen to their friends talk, and then something may happen. So anger management is another one. Substance abuse, Al-Anon kind of things, Alateen, guys who or women now who's somebody that they love is a substance abuser. If you live with a substance abuser, you got 2/3 of the disease yourself. It affects the way you view things. A quick story, I know a woman, I was at a meeting one night, and one woman was going on and on and on and on about her problem. Her problem was her husband, who was a drinker. And another woman listened as long as she could, and she finally said, listen, I didn't come here to talk about your husband, I came to listen to you. Let me give you an example. I thought my problem was my husband, who was a drunk. Until one day I realized I was strapping my 2-year-old and my 4-year-old in the back seat of a car with the drunk. So who's sick? So who's sick? So if you're living with that, you have the sickness as well. So dealing with either the kid's own substance abuse, right? Now marijuana is legal, right? Well, the only ones getting it are not the people who are legal to get it. So you got kids coming into school high. You've got kids that were high. If they were high last night, they're high in the morning when they're coming to class. So addressing those issues. There's another group, it's called the blues men. Guys who have discovered that they suffer from depression. So if you listen to those groups, girls who have been abused, right? Girls with absent fathers has a huge impact. Girls who've lost their moms, they meet. We have our morning meeting at the same time that the morning meeting goes on, these groups happen. At our morning meeting, if you're not at the meeting, your name is called, right? Adults have much more concern about anonymity than kids do. Kids have very little concern about anonymity. So you'll hear people at our place, kids will say, he's not here, he's in counseling. Well, the more you say that, the more somebody else may say, you know what? Maybe I ought to look at that. And kids will bring one another to the counseling center. Remember what I said in the beginning. 90% of what we see, and I believe is true all over the country, 90% of what we see is academic underachievement, has nothing to do with cognition. So if you can, so that's the biggest thing that's addressed. Academic underachievement for us has been the counseling center. And then I said, I don't want to repeat the same things. You have to have a staff that recognizes all the things that Kefeli's talking about in terms of students. But the college placement issue is not as big an issue as people think it is. It may become a bigger issue depending on the Supreme Court. Right. But if you're a guy, men are disappearing in higher education in this country. Where's the doctor? Where's the chancellor? Is that true, Chancellor? Men are disappearing in higher education? There you go. So getting men into college is not that difficult. Getting men out of college, that's a whole different story. That's what you've got to work towards. But people also ask me, how do you know you're being successful? Well, first of all, I wasn't called to be successful. I was called to be faithful. Right? But if you're going to measure success is when people who grew up that I worked for when they were growing up can come back and introduce me to their partner, and to their kids if they have them. Then I know maybe we helped accompany them through life.
Thank you for that.
So first I agree with both of those summations. That's first of all, in terms of the cultural relevance, like you have to make your school into a living library. You know, you have to have excerpts of speeches, paintings, everything around where kids can see all of the time. Books that they have to see the adults reading books and talking about books and engaged in conversation that's higher level, right? And not talking about their neighbor down the hall, but higher level conversations that kids can get involved in as well. You know, they have to do that. Those groups that we had helped to facilitate that. as well. The social and emotional thing, just identifying and recognizing children every day is important. We are in buildings with kids, we don't even say hello. In the morning, it goes a long way when a kid walk in the building, I see him, yo, Shadi, what up, bruh? Just that right there changes the entire day because you don't know what happened last night. Dr. Brown was an expert at that kind of stuff. We began walking through all of the classrooms. We began walking through all of our classrooms, right? So we had the regular walkthroughs that the district said that we had to do, but we expanded that. We had teacher leader walkthroughs. We had parent walkthroughs where they walk through the classroom, that Dr. Brown created these kind of tools for us. So when we go to the classrooms, the teachers knew what they were looking for, the parents knew what they were looking for, they knew what to say. Then we debriefed afterwards, then we talked to the teachers about what everybody saw. Other teachers went to other teachers' classrooms. So if we had a classroom that we thought was doing well, we made sure teachers who were not doing that well go visit that classroom. We did that collectively, so we didn't put people on the spot, say, oh, you need to go visit this classroom. We did it collectively till it got to a point where teachers began to do that anyway, on their own. I'm gonna go visit this classroom, because it's the culture now. We visit each other's classrooms. It's no big thing. So we did that. We created opportunities to showcase all of the best practices that were happening in the building and let parents see it from their perspective so they can see how their children act, what's happening in terms of education, all of those things, and then have a kind of summation of what they thought was going on, and we talk about it with the teachers. Some really things that I think happened for us immediately, we changed the schedule. That's number one. We realized that our kids were not passing the math part of the HESPA then. I don't know what they're taking now. God, I know it's some craziness. But they were not passing it because they didn't have geometry, or they had geometry after the test. Or the math that they had to know about on the test, they didn't even have it yet. Right? And so there's no way they're going to pass it. They weren't even introduced to it. So we had to give it to them at a different time of their matriculation through high school. The problem was we were forced to give them other classes instead of that because the district made us give them those remediation classes, foundations math. I don't know if you guys know the foundation. I don't want to talk about nobody. But we had these classes that we had to teach that really did not count towards your graduation in any kind of way. And it wasn't preparatory, right? So at the end of the day, we began doubling the classes, right? So we got a habit of saying, oh, a kid failed in 40 minutes, so we're gonna give them the same thing in 80. So now they're gonna fail in 80 minutes. So yeah, they failed in 40, we're gonna put them back, and now they're gonna do it again, which is ridiculous, right? And so we didn't completely disobey. We did not give them the 80 minutes. We just gave them two separate classes in that 80 minutes that were related to the same thing. So we had to separate the tracks. Some kids had Algebra 1 and geometry, or Algebra 1 and something else. Some kids had the class that they made us give them plus Algebra 1 together. So they had that and that with the same teacher. We had to, transfer them from that to this. So we did that. And it got to a point where we doubled classes that some kids would finish the day, particularly seniors, who were finished at 12:30. So what do you do with kids who finished at 12:30? You let them go home. But you only could go home if you had a job or if you were connected to some of our dual enrollment situations that we had at Essex County and NJIT. We started this at NJIT when they were not taking our kids. I had a conversation with Dr. Bloom and told him we're going to create a program where our kids are going to come to NJIT. They're going to leave school and they're going to come to school here, right? We put a bunch of kids in there. Some kids who probably had no business. If you did a pretest, they had no business in the class. But they were successful. They were successful in that. In fact, one of them, Timothy Ellis, who was a wrestler and was not really interested in math, graduated from that program and graduated from NJIT, was accepted in NJIT, graduated from NJIT, and is an engineer today.
Come on now, yes.
with a job and is an engineer today who went through that program, right? Because we created it and told them they got to take more kids, and they did that. Because we doubled those classes, we gave the time for them to leave, and we allowed our teachers to write curriculum. And we paid them to write curriculum in the summertime. We paid them to write curriculum with our little, money we got from the, yeah, that's right, SIG, that's what it is, SIG. I know one of those things. We took our SIG grant money and we paid teachers to write curriculum that we actually taught in the school. We had to get it approved. Some of it got approved, some of it we taught anyway. But we taught it in the school, and because our philosophy was like, it was ridiculous to give kids English 1 over and over again. Right, the kids failing English 1, so they got to take English 1 again. You got 50 kids in the building who failed English 1. They keep failing English 1. Something's wrong with the kid. No, it's something wrong with English 1. Right? Why do we keep putting them in this stupid class? So at the end of the day, maybe we should give them something else, because the education is not, we can teach the kid with different content. We're trying to teach them skills. You could teach them, I could give them a class with novels. We could read African-American novels, and they could learn what they were supposed to learn in English 1 through a class about novels, right? Or books that they want to read, where they see themselves in it, or poetry, or whatever it is. But they can learn what we're trying to teach them in English 1 through a poetry class. And we began to do that. And we extended the school day before anybody was talking about extending the school day. We extended the school day. We kept the freshmen longer than everybody else. We created classes and gave freshmen classes, and they got out of school at 4 o'clock. We extended. Then the teachers complained. So what did we do? We changed the schedule to allow some teachers to come in earlier so they could leave earlier. And some teachers came in later and they left later. So we didn't have to use more money. We just organized the schedule in such a way where the teachers who came later stayed later with the kids at 4, and those who came earlier with kids in the morning got to leave earlier at 12 with the other kids who were leaving at 12 and 12:30. We changed the schedule. Those are things that you can do like today, as long as people not harassing you. But you can do it today, right? As long as they're not coming there beating you over the head with nothing. But you can make these things happen immediately. And if you do those things and change the school culture and actually love the kids at the same time, the success you'll get will be rapid and tremendous, because the kids know you love them, so they'll allow you to take the risk you were supposed to take. I want to end on this. It was a kid who went home. His mother was being beaten by her boyfriend. He came in there and saw it. He got a whole bunch of options there, you know what I mean, in terms of, because he was a kid from the street, right? He got a whole bunch of options that he wanted to do with that. He made a decision that he was going to come to the school. So he lives this way. He goes down the street, past the precinct, to the building to get Mr. Baraka. That's what the police was saying when they finally got there. They was like, but he walked past the precinct. That's because the precinct wasn't his help. So he walked past the precinct, came right into the school, and got me. And I was in a meeting with the guys that I'm with. So when I went out the building, guess what? They followed me. So when we got to they followed me, Mike followed me. When we got to the kid door, knocked on the door, there's a whole bunch of kids at the door and Mr. Baraka. We walk in there, they sitting down, so forth and so on. We take the kid and the mother out of there. We walk back to the school, so forth and so on, and the police come to the school. That's what happened. That kid will allow you to put him in any class you want to put him in and take any risk you want to take with him, because he knows for a fact that you got his back and that you're not going to put him in a situation that's dangerous. That's putting it all together.
I want to thank you. Let's give them another round of applause. This was so powerful, and I'm happy that and I know you guys have other venues where you share your story, but I'm glad that you took the time, and it's so related to educational equity, right? It's because we're talking about fairness and justice. I did promise we're about to go to our sessions, but I did not want to leave unless someone had one question, right? We were going to spend a little more time on question, but does someone have one question that they want to ask these greats before we move on?
for this opportunity of being here. I actually got this information from Kalina Berryman. I didn't know this program existed, so I'm glad to spend the Saturday morning with you. Thank you for all of your shared experiences. Speaking of counseling, which is important in the student community, I wonder what your take is with the plan to end the 90 school-based student youth service programs by June 30th, the proposal, and how would that affect you and the students that you work with? Thank you.
Anybody want to answer that question?
Yeah, so again, these are folks that are making decisions based on their perspective. So they're saying that they have these school-based models in places where people aren't using them, so they want to create these regional kind of centers where people can go and get the kind of social service and mental health treatment and all that in regional places. That's what they want to set up, because they're saying people aren't using them. But that's based on a discussion that they had from up here, right? And what I heard on this panel today was that, you know, people closer to the problem are the people who should have the greatest voice in the solutions to the problem. So, you know, you need to be talking to kids who actually have to get these services, and parents who have to take them to the services and find out what we need to do to make it effective. Because really what they're saying is it has not been working, and their way of making it work better is giving people less access to it, which doesn't make sense to me. On its face, doesn't make sense.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Joya Clark. I work here at NJIT, and I'm also a prison educator. So I wanted to hear from you about how do we make it better, the connection between the public school system and the school leaders, and us prison educators, where we really feel disconnected from you, and all of the rich things that I heard from you don't really trickle down often to us. How do we make this better?
Well, I think there is a disconnect. We have been having meetings recently with juvenile justice, with the court system, the city has, and Newark Public Schools with the superintendent and other folks, trying to figure out how do we share information. Partly because some kids are in the youth house for periods of time, and we find out they're in the youth house a month or two later after they've been in the youth house. The school don't know nothing about it. They didn't even know they had an incident, never mind they was in the youth house. So just having a conversation, and there's barriers we put in place that don't exist. The first conversation was courts was saying, oh, we don't have the law doesn't allow us to give information to the schools. Then we researched that and found that that wasn't even true. That the law does allow you to give information to the schools upon their request, right? So schools have to request this information of the courts, the juvenile justice system, the legal system, and have, you know, kind of levers in place where we exchange information. That needs to happen right away. Something as simple as a kid got arrested over the weekend. A kid's mother was killed over the weekend. Something just happened over the weekend. And that needs to be trickled down to schools and principals. Then there needs to be a relationship between the educational, like the individual educational plans for students sent over to like these kind of institutions. The same way you would do if a kid was suspended, right? If a kid is out of school for a long period of time, the kind of individual education plan you set up for them, you need to do that for folks that are also incarcerated, right? And that needs to happen. That's adults that are in the way of that, right? And really the leadership of these institutions have to meet with each other and figure that out.
Good morning, Warriors. My background is 18th Avenue Elementary School, West Kennedy Junior High, Southside High, and Cheney State College, and 50 years of educational teaching. I've taught in 6 urban districts and taught in 3 suburban districts. And there is a difference. We talk about inequality, but my point is the black districts work under a different set of rules than the suburban districts. And there's always going to be a greater divide. And my thing is, how do we overcome the psychological pathology that white is better? And that is, even my coworkers, you know, they want to move into suburban neighborhoods, even though they're making money in urban areas, because they feel that their children will get a better education in the suburban environment. How do we counteract that? What are some of your suggestions on how we counteract the fact that we believe that white is better? Even in universities now, they are buying off our intelligentsia, offering them $5,000 and $6,000 to come to these major white universities, but they're not going to get out of there, because I've done postgraduate work, and you do not get an A, you get a B, and things like that, and it's very discouraging. So what can be done at the high school level to, make parents believe in the schools right where they are can do the same job as the suburban district?
Well, that's Rudy Kefele left. He started talking about Carter G. Woodson. We looking for the back door. But I would agree with you that, that's like when people come to the school, they always come to me and ask me, "Did you see the principal?" But the funny thing is, it's not really funny, is that we internalize that. So we begin to believe that we are not as valuable as we are. And I think self-worth, and that's what all of us have been up here talking about, making sure kids have self-worth and have value and believe in who they are and what they have the ability to accomplish. I think it starts there, to begin, because you're talking about generations of folks who have been taught. It's like the problem with teaching black studies is you asking people to teach black studies who have not had it themselves, right? And so it's difficult for them to teach it because they haven't had it. They grew up in the same environment that we're trying to push back against. So you're asking people to have this kind of thinking and this kind of values that they don't have. Father Ed just said, folks are racist. That's because you grew up in a system that teaches you that. You have to unlearn it, right? And so you have to unlearn it, and sometimes you're unlearning it with your children, with the students in the class. And that's right, it is okay, but you have to one, be able to identify that that's what's going on, right? And take an active and deliberate effort and initiative to do this type of stuff. Because ultimately the systems that you're talking about that need to be changed have to be changed by folks that are not in these situations. And we have to educate our children so when they leave out of these things that they begin to know that they have to eradicate this, dismantle it, and turn it upside down. That's some of the stuff I was trying to talk about yesterday, that they have to change these things, that's why they're being educated, so that they can change the reality of these spaces. This is stuff that existed generations before these kids even got into high school.
Correct. The other suffering that I've encountered, it's not my suffering, but I've encountered people who have suffered it, is that the more highly educated, you may have experienced it yourself, sir, that the more, especially for young men, the more you begin to feel like, where do I fit? It's hard to come back. I remember a guy who was a Rhodes Scholar from South 10th Street, lived next door to you, who had the darndest time coming back into Newark and seeing the condition that his people were living in, but he knew he didn't belong in the other world either, because he wasn't accepted, right? He was a Rhodes Scholar and a Harvard Law School graduate and the Kennedy School. So this people without a country is we have to support as well. And then when young people begin to do it, they also encounter this. I've dealt with kids with this challenge, that they go home and get told, "You think you're better than us because you're going to Princeton, you're going to Harvard, you're going to Bowdoin, you're going to Bates, you're going to Swarthmore, you're going to NJIT. You think you're better than we are." Well, that cuts you right to the heart, especially if you're hearing it from home when you already are hearing it were at both debates or wherever. So it's a big time challenge, I think, that the community has to be supportive of these people, these young people who are becoming highly educated and able to dismantle the thing, but they need support and encouragement because you can get worn out. You can get worn out.
I want to say something to that, though. I don't disagree, but on the reverse of that is like sometimes when you go to these institutions, they make you believe you're better than people. And then when you go to these places, you have this kind of air about you that make you feel this way. And the reality is that's because you're being taught by people who believe that their teaching's a monkey, right? And the reason I'm saying that is because like we've taught this person to do incredible things, but everybody else can't do it. He's special. Because we taught this person to do all of this. Everybody else can't do it, right? So just look at how great they bring their friends around. Look, can you see he can talk? You know, and that you know, people say that to me. You're so articulate. You know, they say, oh, you're so articulate. And I'll be, well, where did you think? Like I was gonna come up here and rap? I don't understand what's going on. Like, you know, you're so, no, that's what people say because, you know, you have an education, you went to school, yeah, like, and or you see you dressed a certain way. Oh, are you the principal? Yeah, I am the principal. I have a degree. I did this. Da, 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 you know, let's have a discussion. But that's we on both sides of that, right? So our kids, just like the person you're talking about, our kids have to feel like they can be themselves and be intelligent and educated at the same time, right? You can do that, and I learned that by looking at my father. You know, because he was, my father was brilliant and could argue and debate with the best of them, you know what I mean? But he also could like sit in the living room and, you know, and do the, you know, whatever. So that right there is enough for you to understand that you maneuver and navigate in both worlds. You can do that and it's okay. And you're talking about people who don't feel comfortable in the world that they're in and the world that they came from. Right, because they're not comfortable with themselves. And we got to make people feel comfortable with who they are.
I want to ask you, Mayor, because you are the mayor of the city, and I've been asking this for a very long time. I know you, Father Ed, you know Jeff Granger Jr., who graduated from your school. You know my twin sister and her son. And I like the camaraderie that is built at their school. When you go to their graduation, every one of their seniors grab each other and they hug and they do a song, whatever that song is Father Ed is talking about. When I went there for the first time to see my nephew graduate, I understand why their alumni come back and give back. Now, what I want to ask the mayor that I've been asking for years, and you keep talking about our children and why don't our children feel they have voices? Well, they don't feel we have voices because we're not teaching them to, or you, to form a group like the suburban communities do that go down to Trenton and fight for their budget and their money. I went to Trenton to talk to the Senate and Assembly, and I'll be dog if every community from the suburban areas had their children there on a class trip that they didn't miss school. They were counted in their school because they were there on a class trip, but they were signed up to speak for their budget and for money for their budget. And guess who was there from Newark? Guess how many students I had behind me? Guess who I had to come back and tell to the superintendent, and then why y'all not down there testifying for our budget? So they did do it. We had a conference here in Newark where they was talking about the budget. Where was our people? The students from the suburban areas was in this very room right here with their shirts on. Talk about don't take money from our budget or we coming for you. Where y'all at? The faces that look like me, the parents that look like me, the educators that look like me, the ones that want more money, the unions that look like me. Where y'all at? Where they at, Mayor? Why don't we have a committee that wear our Newark jackets and we go sit down there at the education committee and talk to them about the curriculum, the legislation we need change, the money we need? Because stop saying there ain't no money, it's plenty money. We just don't go for it. So we need to develop a group of people that is always in Trenton advocating for Newark. I went to the Trenton where they set the budget for all of Newark. I brought a packet back when you first got elected. That was my first time going, and I went with the local CWA to testify. I ain't see nobody here in Newark there. I ain't see nobody from the mayor's office there, but all the suburban communities was there. So I gave out information and stood up and said, Newark looking for you to come invest. I testified for our property taxes and housing. Where we at? And then we wonder why we don't have, because we ain't sitting at the table. And you sit and talk about making leaders and sitting at the table, but you're not at the table. You educators talk about sitting at the table, but you're not at the table. You talk about your evaluations and how they penalize you, but you're not there giving your voice and lending your voice to how you want to be evaluated and how you should be evaluated. We vote them people in Trenton. They don't vote us in. So, Mayor, I'm asking you to develop some type of committee that goes to advocate for education, for equity. We talk equity here, but equity starts at the state assembly and assembly level. So that's all I wanted to ask.
I'm used to Denise. She was my parent. She harassed me when I was the principal. I had her son in the school and everything. So I gotta be careful what I say upstairs because she can tell you if it's true or not. He ain't wearing that because he don't know what that means. No, because she didn't know what that meant. I had to tell her what it meant. But he wore it.
And so then he explained every one of the things in there, and then he could wear his uniform. But I'm not putting my child on something I don't understand. So at the end, that's all I'm asking. Everybody get involved and take all of us.
I mean, I think that what she's saying is so appropriate because that is the outcome of this type of conference. That is a part of, it's embedded into the protocol. And I see Dr. Ince, Robin Ince over there taking copious notes, that this is the type of stuff that we're gleaning from people. Because sometimes we just don't know the advocacy work. We may know the education work, but we might not know the advocacy work. I'm just saying, for example, and I'm sorry, I don't know, Mayor, if you was going to answer this, but I mean, I'm 1 year into the position. First year, spent a lot of time on literacy. This year, my mayor says equity, because we have 3 priorities. Equity, developing a policy lab. That's what you're talking about, right? And literacy. So I jumped in on literacy because I was a teacher, right? I'm like, oh, this is great, literacy, everybody reading. You know, I thought the whole Newark was our classroom. But it is too, that's true. But now we have to do that work that you're talking about, and we need people who are out there doing the work. All right, some of the greats in here, you, Deborah Smith Gregory, all the people out there doing the work to be in that policy lab so we can be informed. Yesterday we ended our session, wasn't a lot of people there, not as much as this morning, with engaging the policymakers. People don't know how to navigate the system. Democracy has to even be taught. Right, I'm just keeping it real. Like even from my perspective, right? You know, I did a letter writing campaign with my students because I had to teach a business essay, right? And so I said, well, why not teach them how to advocate for the community? We didn't know who the assembly people were. We didn't know who any of these people were. So we have to teach that. So we're writing that down. I'm gonna call you. You've been at the think tank, right? She's been at the think tank. I'm calling all you all the time because you inform us and we all can collectively do it together. But we do have to start fighting more. So let's give it up for that was a powerful way to close up. And, okay.
Go ahead. I just asked permission to say one thing. I don't get in front of groups like this in Newark. I get around the country, but I've had the privilege of being raised twice. So by my parents, obviously, but then being raised here, by his father, by Clement Price, by a lot of, so I just want to say thank you for trusting us and me and raising me into being in a way that I hope I can give some help. So thank you.
If you haven't been over to any of his convocations or morning meetings, you should go check it out. It's an experience. It's serious. It's very serious.
Yeah, we just went to one and I was like crying. I was in it. They was hugging and singing. And then I thought I was at Central because they start breaking out a dance. And that call and response, like if somebody danced over there, somebody else got, it's not really a competition.
You don't expect that at St. Benedict's.
Right.
But,
right. And it's
Because
happening.
you said we at Central, not St. Benedict's.
Right, but I love it because that's their cultural expression, right? And we got to stop demonizing things that we don't understand, and that's that risk taking, being safe with kids dancing. They thought I was crazy in Big Tuesday. I was in there by myself, and they was all, and we all on the stage, and I tried the dances and failed, and that's okay too, right? Because in trying them said you matter, and you can teach me something. Right, and I also showed them because I'm just say this and we're gonna close out. When I got my doctorate, everybody, I was a principal at the time at Central. Everybody loved it. The students celebrated me more than anyone. I remember I started off the year without a doctor title, and then the mayor came and spoke. And I don't even know if he knew I got my doctorate, because that happened in May and we graduated in June. He stepped up to the mic and said, Miss Brown. They was like, Dr. Brown, right? And so what that said is that we can respect each other. And again, it's not necessarily code switch, but just kind of be in each other's world. It's okay to be, right? Be yourself. And we can make this thing happen. And we got too much brilliance, and our kids are with us. That's what, out of the 29 years I've had as an educator, and just what they shared, I know you know more in your heart that young people are the best people to buy in and to get any movement moving. So let's just leverage that and bring them to the table. And that is the type of work that we're going to do. And again, I can't thank these greats enough. These are your flowers, these are your flowers, these are your flowers. Thank you for investing in our children and being successful. And I'm going to take your quote: with overwhelming anger and overwhelming joy, the only thing that can beat, and hate, the only thing that beat that is overwhelming love. So that is what we're going to end up. So let's give them another round of applause. Can we stand? I'm sorry. I believe in things like that, and we need to stand up. We've been sitting for a long time.